There's no take two. There's no just a little more purple. Warts and all, you've downloaded the VO Radio Show.
Welcome to the VO Radio Show and welcome to 2017. My name's Andrew Peters and up in Sydney is...
Robbo. How you going, mate?
Good. How was your new year?
Oh, it was too good. I don't want to be back. The sight of a microphone makes me feel sad at the moment.
It's funny, isn't it? You just cannot get your head back into the work mode.
And it's because I work from home, and I think you and I were talking about this before the show, because we both work from home, it's sort of like, should I still be on holidays or should I be back at work?
Yeah, and it's really difficult because we both got young kids, so the kids are not at school in Australia, because this is our big summer holiday, of course, in Australia. And I live by the coast, so everybody's down here for their month off or whatever. So they kind of think, I'm not working, so hey, let's call Andrew and let's pop over for a barbecue and have a few drinks. And I'm like, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm working.
I've got a bunch of scripts sitting on my desk.
That's right. So it's a bit of a tricky one. But anyway.
Better to do it before than after the beers, right?
Always before, never after or during.
Indeed.
I've learnt that lesson.
Yeah. I remember, just a quick story, I remember when I was about 19 and I was working at a radio station here in Australia. I decided on a Saturday morning it would be a good idea to go into work stoned. And I built a promo for, I can't remember what it was for, and was left the building that Saturday going, man, that's the best thing I've ever made. Came in on the Monday morning and heard it and pulled it straight off air.
It would have been a shock. I've done a similar thing with, it was an evening call, emergency call. Can you record this promo? And, well into many reds. And I thought, because I had to do it. So I thought, okay, I think I can do this. So I came in, fired up the studio, recorded. I'd do that bit again, and then I sort of cobbled through all the bits, different takes, and made something that I thought was actually quite acceptable. Until I came in the next morning and, like you, played it back and realised how absolutely appalling it was. And then I had to make up some feeble excuse like, look, I'm really sorry about the quality of the voiceover I sent last night, but you actually woke me up. I was fast asleep, and so, yeah, apologies for that.
It's a good thing we're not young anymore, right?
Exactly. Oh, this wasn't that long ago.
Oh, you're talking yesterday,
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Very funny.
And hello to all Andrew's clients out there who are listening this afternoon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry about that. I was very tired and emotional.
Dear. So we can have a bit more of a chat about your eyeball, is that right? Not your eyeball, but your eyeball noise reduction
unit.
What do we call it?
I don't know what we call it, but that sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, because we did the test just before Christmas, and we tested the Kaotica Eyeball and the Harlan Hogan Portabooth Pro. We both felt that the Portabooth Pro was certainly the best option. It's always served me well, I've got to say, so I'm always happy with that. But the Kaotica Eyeball just didn't really cut it at all, I didn't think.
No, it struggled, didn't it?
But it did. But then I went away because I had to go travel interstate to see my family. So, and I stopped on the way and we stayed at a motel on the way through. And of course, in come the scripts. I've got the Kaotica Eyeball. But what I did before I left, I changed microphones, and that seemed to make a pretty big difference. And I remember I sent you a file. I sent our mutual buddy, Tim Simons, the same file. And I used, because it's a multi-pattern microphone, I used figure 8, omni, normal cardioid and hypercardioid, and then asked you and Tim to tell me what you thought. And you came back, I think, and you said you liked hypercardioid. And I think Tim said he liked figure 8. I think it was figure 8 or omni. I think he said figure 8. But I went with hypercardioid because I actually quite liked the hypercardioid setting. Yeah. Now, the microphone, I should say, was it's an old one. It's one of that vintage AKG I bought, the 1980-something C414EB, the P48 model. So it's an old microphone. So I went away in the hotel, set up the eyeball, put it on the hypercardioid, draped a blanket over behind me on some cupboards and stuff, and recorded a couple of things and sent those off. Then I used it again when I actually got to Adelaide in a really reflective room, and it didn't stop the reflection very much at all, I've got to say. But they didn't seem to mind. The client didn't seem to mind too much about the quality of the sound. Not that that's a great indicator particularly, and that's another discussion point. But what I did when I got back, I thought there's got to be some way of controlling what's coming in from behind, because the Kaotica Eyeball only has one small entrance. So I decided to get a piece of Auralex, and I did a test, which we're about to hear, where I put the Auralex behind my head and then took it away in a reflective room. Now, you heard that. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely made a difference to the amount of reflections that it was picking up. I mean, perhaps we should play it so everyone gets an idea of what we're talking about.
Okay. Okay, here's my experiment. I'm standing away from the eyeball, maybe about 6 inches, with nothing around me at all. I'm just sort of standing out in a reflective kind of area. Even though there is lots of Auralex to my left, I'm pointing more towards reflective surfaces like windows and walls. And now, I have a piece of Auralex behind my head, and I think it actually does make a little bit of difference. Let's try coming in a bit closer. Still with the Auralex behind my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not moving in from the mic without the Auralex behind my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So you can hear it there. I mean, yes, there is still some reflection, but it's certainly minimalised by doing it that way. And we've talked about this off air too. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. I mean, you can't completely denoise 360 degrees because your signal's got to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, wherever that opening is, it's going to pick up those reflections. So I think what we're saying here is if you can minimise the reflections coming from behind you in some way, I mean, as you said, on the road in the motel, you used a blanket. When you got home, you were using the Auralex pad. Anything like that to stop those reflections coming in the direction of the open side of the microphone
exactly.
is what you want to aim for.
But I think it did make a bit of a difference. And the question is, as an engineer, would you use that file I sent?
Look, I would happily use that second file with the Auralex. Yes, there are reflections in the first one. And you could still use it. I mean, the discussion we've also had was, the funny thing about us engineers is we complain about reflections and then the last thing we do before we mix out a voiceover is put some reverb on it. So,
yes,
it's nice to be able to control that reverb, absolutely, and to have a completely clean signal. But, at the end of the day, we do touch things with a little bit of reverb just to sort of make them sound that little bit sweeter, If I had the choice of 1 or 2, certainly 2 would be my choice.
So I'm going to experiment even further with that and just see if I can actually come up with a concept where something behind my head will work. So when I do go away the next time, I can chuck a piece of Auralex in my case and use that.
Well, maybe you'll come up with a bit of kit that you can sell. Harlan Hogan's got his. If they've, Eyeball's got theirs out. You could have the Andrew Peters head muffle.
That's right. Reflecto head.
Reflecto head.
All right, I shall employ an engineer. But yes, reflecto head. But anyway,
can you imagine the look on your kid's face when they walk in the room and there's Dad standing there in front of the microphone with a big bit of foam stuck behind his head.
It looks like some deranged superhero.
Yeah, that's right. Just call me Auralex Man.
Yeah, that's right. Auralex Man with his underpants on the outside.
That's no different to any other day for you, though.
Well,
is it?
That's true. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Now, we also touched on the thought of what do people accept, and I had a discussion yesterday with a client I'm doing some e-learning modules for, and they wanted me to redo one because they had this module sent to them, and what the client was telling me down the phone was absolutely horrifying. I could not believe they accepted the rubbish they were given as a voiceover for this e-learning module. It was done in different spaces. It was reflective. The levels were all over the place. It was just an absolute mess. In fact, if she was complaining, I'd love to hear it because I think it would be even worse than what she described on the phone. But one of the things that I think is, and this is a discussion point for you, when you accept files, is I was trying to explain that whenever you record, you always record below zero. So, anywhere between like minus 6 dB and minus 12 dB. And then the audio engineer, when everything's ready, you would bring it up to zero. Is that correct?
Less than, just under zero. I mean, I work to -3 because it gives me a little bit of headroom. Everyone's different. I like -3, still loud, but I do use a brick wall limiter when I mix. But yeah, I mix to -3 anyway is the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Look, I think for me, the quality of what I accept will depend on can I rescue it? And if it's a pain in the ass to rescue or if I can't rescue it, I will say, look, I can't work with this. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'll be reasonable. I do understand that there are voiceovers out there who aren't audio engineers, and we live in a changing world where people this is going to become the norm. So firstly, I would try to educate. And secondly, I mean, if it was a cold voice educational module like you were just talking about, I would expect dead silence, no reflections, because I can't fix that completely, because I wouldn't put reverb on cold voice. But if I was mixing a radio promo and there was a few little reflections, then that would be fine, because by the time I put the music in behind and I do everything else, we're not going to hear that anyway, or it's going to be very hard to hear that. So I think you've got to balance out what you're working on and understand that we live in a changing world. I would certainly send feedback to whoever it was who sent it to me and say, look, you know, I'm happy to use this, but just for your future information, I've found this, and hope that they learnt from that and did something to fix it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, you've got to be, as an engineer, you've got to be reasonable, and you've got to go, well, at the end of the day, is it going to do any damage to my final product? And if it is, then yes, it's a redo. If it's not, then hey, just let it slide.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So I think the key for this is if you're doing audiobooks, the Kaotica Eyeball and probably Harlan Hogan's Portal Booth Pro is not perfect for that, because you're going to get reflections.
No, I think you've got to have a decent... Well, for me as an engineer, I would expect near perfection, because, you know, you're going to hear every little nuance, you know, because it's purely cold voice. There's no way to disguise that.
Beautiful. Okay, well, we hopefully have got closer to coming up with a remedy for the Kaotica Eyeball.
Yeah. Well, it's probably getting close to time to knock off for a beer now. It's almost 10 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
You can hear that cork popping now.
Yeah, and I can hear the barbecue, crackling away in the Background. Beautiful.
That's right. In the meantime, we'll ponder a subject for next week.
Indeed. Until then.
Talk to you then.
Lovely. Have a good one.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. To polish your next audio production, check us out at voodoo-sound.com. Find professional voices simply all in one place. Realtimecasting.com, including me.